The murmur of whispered speculation hung like fog in Courtroom 7 of the Manhattan courthouse, broken only by the faint ticking of the antique wall clock behind Judge Harrison's bench. The tension in the room was a living thing, thick, coiled, waiting to strike. 8-year-old Emma Johnson sat unnoticed in the very last row of the gallery, her tiny frame swallowed by a wooden bench meant for adults. A frayed backpack rested at her feet. It seemed threatening to burst, and her worn spiral notebook was balanced on her knees. She chewed the end of a purple pen, her brown eyes flicking between the scribbled notes on her page and the drama unfolding below. Her faded pink dress sized to big rustled quietly as she shifted in her seat, but no one looked her way. No one ever did. All eyes were fixed on the defendant's table. Michael Thompson, age 28, looked like a man standing on the edge of a cliff. Once the charming, confident heir to Thompson Industries, today he was pale, with sunken eyes and a clenched jaw. 6 months of accusations, media storms, and betrayals had drained the fight from his shoulders. He barely reacted when his attorney Richard Davis, a man who normally exuded courtroom charisma, cleared his throat and stood abruptly. "Your Honor," Davis said, voice smooth but tight, "I regret to inform the court that I am withdrawing from representation. Irreconcilable differences with my client prevent me from ethically continuing." Gasps rippled through the courtroom like tremors before an earthquake. Michael blinked. "What?" he said, but Davis was already stepping back, avoiding his client's eye. Judge Harrison, perched above the chaos with the gravitas of 30 years on the bench, narrowed his eyes and removed his reading glasses with slow precision. "Mr. Davis, do you understand the gravity of your withdrawal at this juncture? We are 2 days from closing arguments." Davis gave a shallow nod. "I do, Your Honor, but I must recuse myself immediately." There was no drama in his tone, no fire, just the surgical slice of finality, and in that moment, something inside Michael visibly broke. His shoulders sank as if gravity had suddenly doubled. He leaned forward, elbows on the table, hands gripping the edge as though it were the last piece of wreckage from a sinking ship. Silence settled like a veiled dot, and then, "I can defend him." The voice was soft, but it cut clean through the hush. A dozen heads turned, another dozen followed, all eyes locked on the back of the courtroom, where a child was standing on tiptoe behind the gallery railing. Emma's heart pounded like thunder in her chest, but she stood straighter. "I said I can defend him." Whispers erupted instantly. Reporters leaned forward. A bailiff started to rise, but Judge Harrison raised a commanding hand. "Who said that?" Emma stepped forward, her sneakers barely making a sound on the polished marble floor. "Me, Emma Johnson. I've been here every day for 3 weeks, and I know he's innocent." The judge stared at her. "Young lady, this is not a stage for games." "I'm not playing," Emma said, though her voice trembled. "I've read every document. I've watched every witness. I can prove he didn't do what they said." Even Michael lifted his head now, confusion mingling with disbelief. One beat, then another. Judge Harrison's gaze didn't soften, but it sharpened. He tapped a finger once on the bench. "Very well," he said. "You've got 1 minute. Miss Johnson, explain yourself." And just like that, the courtroom belonged to a girl with a notebook and the courage to speak. The murmurs hadn't died down when Emma began to walk. She didn't march with the swagger of someone trying to be bold. No, it was the slow, nervous walk of a child who had spent her life being told to be quiet and now was daring to be loud. The weight of the courtroom stared her down with every step she took. Past rows of finely dressed spectators, past the reporters with notebooks frozen in midair, past court officers who didn't know whether to stop her or let her keep going. She clutched her notebook to her chest like armor. Inside were weeks of scribbles, observations, timelines, question marks, and truths no one else had seen. It wasn't just a notebook, it was her father's voice whispering from the past. Judge Harrison's expression was unreadable, but his eyes tracked her like a hawk. "State your full name for the record," he said. Emma stopped a few feet from the front of the gallery. Emma Rose Johnson, 8 years old. Her voice cracked slightly at the end, but she didn't waver. "And why?" Harrison said slowly, leaning forward with practiced menace. "Do you believe you have the authority to address this court, Miss Johnson?" "I don't have authority," Emma replied, drawing in a breath so deep it made her shoulders rise. "But I have the truth." The room went silent again. Even the bailiff, halfway through a warning cough, stayed frozen. Michael Thompson was watching her now, more alert than he had been in days. His lawyer was gone, his reputation destroyed, But in that moment, there was something about the look in this little girl's eyes, a spark of the same fire his father used to carry when he'd speak about justice and legacy. Emma opened her notebook and began flipping through pages, her voice suddenly steady. 3 weeks ago, I came here because the courthouse has free air conditioning and I needed a place to do homework while my mom was working late. But then I heard the name, Michael Thompson, and I remembered it from the newspapers. She turned a page, fingers trembling only slightly. The paper said he stole money from his own company, but that didn't make sense to me. I mean, why would someone steal from themselves? It's like accusing someone of robbing their own. Piggy bank and burying the coins in their backyard. A few people chuckled, nervous, uncertain. But Emma pressed on, so I stayed. I kept coming back. I listened to everything, and I started noticing things. Judge Harrison raised an eyebrow, such as his lawyer, Mr. Davis, Emma said, her gaze shifting toward the now vacated chair where Richard Davis had been sitting only minutes ago. He never objected to anything, not once in 3 weeks. I watched court shows with my dad before he passed away. Real lawyers object. Real lawyers fight. That single word passed landed like a stone dropped into still water. No one missed it. Emma paused for only a heartbeat before continuing. But then I started watching other things, like how Mr. Davis kept checking his phone during recesses, and who he was looking at. Who was he looking at? Judge Harrison asked, his voice quieter now. Emma pointed. Her heads turned sharply to see Victoria Sterling, Michael's fiancée, seated in the third row behind the prosecution, in a tailored navy blue suit that probably cost more than Emma's family spent in a year. Her face didn't twitch, but her hands tightened on her designer purse. Emma turned a page in her notebook. Every day, Mr. Davis would glance at her, and on Tuesday last week, I saw her whisper something to him after lunch. The next day, Mr. Davis stopped asking Michael any questions. Before cross-examinations, like he already knew what not to say. That's pure speculation, came a sharp voice from the prosecution table. Linda Morrison, lead prosecutor, stood with her arms crossed. With all due respect, Your Honor, this child is not qualified to draw conclusions about courtroom behavior. Sit down, counselor. Judge Harrison snapped, and a collective gasp rose again. He turned back to Emma, his expression now harder to read. Do you have any evidence, Miss Johnson? Not just observations? Emma nodded. Slowly, her fingers reached into the pocket of her dress and pulled out a folded receipt, crinkled and faintly stained with grape juice. This is from the trash outside, she said. Mr. Davis dropped it after lunch. On the back, he wrote down an account number. I saw it during testimony too, but it didn't match Michael's real banking info. The number ends in 2018. That's the same account that got wired money from Thompson Industries and then immediately moved to an offshore bank. She held it up, and there are initials next to it. V.S. Victoria's composure cracked just for a second. Her mouth opened slightly. Then her lips pressed shut again, tighter than before. Coincidence, she muttered. Maybe, Emma said. But then you whispered to Mr. Davis yesterday, stick to the plan. Once he's convicted, we inherit everything. I was sitting behind the water cooler, and I wrote it down. The room exploded. Whispers, shouting, reporters scrambling for their phones. The bailiff stood and called for order. Judge Harrison slammed his gavel so hard the sound echoed like a gunshot. Quiet, he roared. He turned to Emma, who was breathing fast but hadn't looked away. You're accusing an officer of the court of collusion. You're implicating a member of the prosecution's inner circle. This is serious, Miss Johnson. Very serious. Emma nodded slowly. I know, but my daddy always told me telling the truth is never wrong, even if it's dangerous. Judge Harrison stared at her. The courtroom waited. Somewhere, a reporter was already whispering into their recorder. David versus Goliath. But David wears sparkly sneakers and carries a notebook. Then, in a voice no longer skeptical, Judge Harrison said, Miss Johnson, please continue, and the real battle began. The courtroom door had barely shut behind the stunned Victoria Sterling when the murmurs began to morph into something darker. Fear. The kind of fear that creeps up your spine when you realize the rules have changed, that this isn't just a legal drama anymore. This was something far more dangerous. Judge Harrison, normally composed and in total control, was gripping the edge of his bench so hard his knuckles had gone white. His gavel rested unused at his side, as if even he realized the tool of justice no longer belonged in his hands, but perhaps in the hands of the girl Standing below him, Emma Johnson did not look like a threat. Her pink dress hung unevenly on her small frame. Her shoelaces were untied. But her notebook, that notebook had become a weapon sharper than any prosecutor's cross-examination, page after page. It peeled back layers of courtroom performance and exposed something far uglier underneath. I believe, Judge Harrison said slowly, that we may be on the verge of uncovering a conspiracy far deeper than initially thought. He turned toward the prosecutor's table. Ms. Morrison, you will order a full investigation into Mr. Davis's financials and personal communications immediately. Linda Morrison gave a stiff nod. Her lips pressed so tightly together they had vanished. But Emma wasn't done. She took a shaky breath, then held up a second slip of paper. This one was crisp, carefully folded. Her hands trembled as she unfolded it. I didn't want to show this unless I had to, she said quietly, because it scared me. Michael, sitting at the defendant's table, leaned forward, his green eyes locked on hers. This is a page I tore out of my notebook after I overheard a phone call yesterday, Emma continued. Victoria Sterling was in the hallway. She didn't see me behind the water fountain. She was whispering, but I heard her say something about a phase 2. Judge Harrison blinked. Phase 2? Emma nodded, flipping the note toward him on the evidence tray with a single, practice push. She said, and I quote, Emma read from the duplicate in her notebook, Richard, stick to the plan. Once Michael is convicted, I'll inherit everything through the engagement clause. Then we vanish, Cayman Islands. But if the girl makes noise, we move to phase 2. Don't hesitate. A chill swept the room. The phrase move to phase 2 was the kind of thing people said in movies about secret assassins and cover-ups, not in courtrooms involving financial fraud. Your Honor, Detective Sarah Chen rose from her spot in the gallery, flashing her badge for all to see. Detective Chen, NYPD Financial Crimes. I've been trailing suspicious activity linked to Sterling Enterprises for months. I request immediate custody of Miss Sterling's phone, and I recommend protective custody for the child. No, Emma said, her voice cutting through like a blade. Everyone turned. I don't want to run, she continued, because I'm the only one who knows what to look for. If they try to erase evidence or hurt Mr. Thompson's family, I need to be there. Michael's voice was hoarse. Emma. He sounded like a man who had lost everything and just found the one reason to believe again. She's right, said Judge Harrison after a beat of silence that weighed like stone. We need her. But if this phase 2 is what I fear it is, God, help us all. Then, as if summoned by fear itself, a bailiff stormed into the room, panting. Emergency call from Presbyterian Hospital. He gasped. Mr. William Thompson's room. Someone just tried to alter his IV medication. Nurse caught it at the last second. A collective inhale swept through the courtroom like a tidal wave. Emma's hand flew to her mouth. There. Trying to silence him, she whispered. Michael was on his feet in an instant. My father. They're going after my father. Judge Harrison stood. This court is in recess. Detective Chen, escort Miss Johnson and Mr. Thompson to the hospital. Now, and make sure you're armed. But as Emma turned to leave, her small hand still gripping her notebook like a lifeline, she glanced at Richard Davis's empty chair. Something was wrong. Something more. As she saw it, a faint blinking red light on the chair's underside. Her father had taught her about that recording devices, real-time transmission. Emma leaned closer and saw it, tucked beneath the armrest. They'd been recording everything. Her stomach dropped. Her pulse thundered. They weren't just planning to frame Michael. They were listening. Right now. She turned to Detective Chen and whispered so only she could hear. Someone outside this room knows everything we just said. Chen's eyes widened. She turned, scanning the gallery. Emma's voice was shaking as she said, We're not just fighting a liar. We're fighting a network, and I think it goes all the way to the top. Top? Chen asked. Emma's gaze slowly turned to the bench. Judge Harrison stood frozen watching her. And in that moment, she saw it. The flicker, the calculation, the fear. He knew something. And for the first time, she realized he wasn't just an observer. He was part of it, and that meant this courtroom was never safe. The fight for truth had just stepped into enemy territory, and Emma Johnson was the only one who knew how deep the rot truly went. She looked at Michael, then at Chen, and then she said the words that would echo for months across headlines and news broadcasts. Get us to the hospital now. Because the people trying to silence them weren't just criminals. They were the justice system itself. The siren screamed across Manhattan from the back seat of the unmarked NYPD vehicle. Emma could barely see out the windows. Her little fingers gripped the edge of her seat as flashing lights painted streaks of red and blue across her face. Michael sat beside her, silent, his jaw clenched so tightly it looked like he might break teeth. In the front, Detective Sarah Chen's eyes never left the road, but her fingers kept darting to the police radio, issuing orders, demanding status reports. Unit 45, report. Status on Presbyterian, do we have security at room 1047? The response crackled back, affirmative, but we've had a power cut in the administrative wing. Cameras are down. Chen swore under her breath. Beside Emma, Michael turned. That's my father's room. 1047, Emma's breath caught. She had been trying to put the pieces together during the ride, flipping through her notebook under the glow of passing headlights. But now the pages blurred, her thoughts scattered. Power outage, room 1047. Face to dot, no. She turned to Chen, eyes wide. Detective, this is part of it. The blackout is not an accident. It's part of phase 2. They're making their move now. Chen's knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. A chilling thought struck Emma like a punch to the stomach. What if they weren't just going to silence William Thompson? What if they were going to replace him, frame him as the source of the fraud, alter medical records, fabricate a confession, kill him if necessary, and bury every last trace of resistance? The car skidded to a halt in front of the hospital. Chen threw open her door. Stay behind me, but Emma was already moving. She tore through the sliding doors, darting past reception, ignoring the gasps from nurses who shouted after the disheveled girl running through the hospital. Like a fire, alarm had gone off. The 8th floor smelled like antiseptic and panic. Security guards were arguing at the nurse's station. The lights in the hallway flickered, glitching from the outage. Then Emma saw him, a man in surgical scrubs, tall, moving quickly, carrying a clipboard with no badge, heading toward room 1047. Her instincts screamed. Her feet moved. Stop him, she cried. He's not a real doctor. But he was already slipping through the doorway. Emma chased him, Michael, and Chen seconds behind her in when she burst through the door. To William Thompson's room, the nightmare hit full force. The imposter had already drawn a syringe. William Thompson lay unconscious, tubes connecting him to monitors and medication lines. The imposter stood over him, ready to inject something clear and fatal into the floor. Emma didn't think. She sprinted, colliding with the man's side. The syringe clattered to the floor. Get away from him, she screamed, grabbing for the fortubine and doing what her father had once shown her during hospital visits, kicking the line sharply to stop anything from entering. The man snarled, lunging at her, but Michael was there, now, slamming into him with all the rage of a son who had nearly lost everything. The man hit the wall hard. Alarms were already blaring. Nurses poured in. Chen tackled the intruder and handcuffed him with brutal precision. And just like that, it was over. Or so they thought. Emma backed away from the bed, her heart pounding in her ears, her hands shaking. She looked at William. His breathing was shallow, but steady. Then she saw it, a folder on the table, not the hospital chart, a forged transfer document, signed by William Thompson, giving power of attorney to Victoria Sterling, except the date on the bottom was tomorrow. Her voice was barely a whisper. They were going to kill him tonight, and then backdate the paperwork to make it look like he transferred everything willingly. Michael turned to her. What? They were going to kill him, and tomorrow walk into a court with this. She lifted the paper with trembling hands and take everything, the company, the trust, the inheritance. Chen grabbed the document, her face dark. That's it, she said. That's what we needed. Emma turned, suddenly lightheaded, but her instincts weren't done yet. Wait, she said. There's someone else. Chen's head snapped up. What do you mean? Emma looked around, then pointed to the IV machine. A tiny red light blinked behind it. A camera. Not hospital equipment. Someone else was watching. Emma ran to the window. Across the street, parked behind a line of ambulances, was a black sedan. In the driver's seat, a man in a suit. Binoculars. She could see them. They're watching us, she whispered. They knew we'd come. This was all part of the setup. Chen pulled out her radio. Secure the patient. Lock down the floor. And give me surveillance footage now. But Emma felt it in her gut. They were still too late. because just before the man in the car drove off, he turned slightly and Emma saw the face. It wasn't just another henchman, it was Judge Harrison, the man sworn to uphold justice, the man who had looked at her in that courtroom with cold, calculating eyes, and now she knew beyond any doubt that this wasn't about one trial, one inheritance, or even one family. This was a war. Emma turned back to Chen. "We can't stop them here," she said. "We have to go deeper. My dad knew this was bigger, and now I do too." Michael walked to her side, putting a hand on her shoulder. And Emma Johnson, 8 years old, battle-worn but unbroken, lifted her notebook and whispered, "They tried to kill the truth tonight." She turned back toward the hallway where nurses were rushing to and fro. "But they'll have to try harder, because Faista wasn't just their plan anymore. It was hers now, too, and she was just getting started." The hospital had never been quiet, but now it felt loud with silence. Security personnel swarmed the cardiac unit, flashing badges, barked orders. Surgeons, nurses, and administrators exchanged frantic glances as they watched an 8-year-old girl in a wrinkled pink dress point out surveillance bugs, forged documents, and attempted murder plots with the calm precision of a war general. But Emma Johnson wasn't calm. Inside her chest, her heart roared like a caged beast. She'd stared down poison IVs, tackled a killer in scrubs, and stopped a murder. But what chilled her now wasn't the danger, it was the face in the car across the street. Judge Harrison. He had been watching it all, which meant he knew she had won the battle, and that meant he was already preparing the war. She turned to Detective Chen, who was conferring with a team of FBI agents who had arrived only moments earlier. But even they were shaken. Their radios crackled with contradictory orders. Power had returned to the administrative wing, but so had interference on the internal servers. Video footage was missing, logs erased, access badges duplicated. It wasn't a hack. It was infiltration. Chen saw Emma and hurried over. "We need to get you and Michael into protective custody," she said, her voice tight. "Harrison's gone underground, and until we understand the full extent of his operation, no." Emma interrupted. Her voice was quiet, but filled with something stronger than volume. Finality. "No more hiding. That's what he wants. He's counting on fear." Michael, exhausted and emotionally wrecked, still managed to nod in agreement. "She's right. Harrison controls the courts, the cops, maybe the FBI. The only way we beat him is in daylight." Emma took out her notebook and flipped to a page she hadn't dared look at in weeks. Not since her father died. A name, a number, a message in her father's handwriting. "If Harrison ever comes after you, call this number. It's the backup plan. It's everything." Chen leaned in. "Whose number is that?" Emma swallowed. "Someone my dad trusted. Someone from inside the bureau. He called them the clean room. A group working secretly on corruption cases. My dad said they didn't report to local offices." Just DC. Chen's eyebrows lifted. "A federal task force?" "Higher," Emma said. And then she dialed. The man who answered didn't say hello. His voice came through like a blade through static. "Who gave you this number?" "My name is Emma Johnson," she said. "Robert Johnson was my dad, and I think he was murdered." The line was silent. Then, "Where are you?" She gave the hospital's name and room number. The voice didn't say goodbye, just hung up. 30 minutes later, 3 men in charcoal suits arrived, escorted by a woman with silver hair and a tablet. They didn't speak until they entered a private security room. There, surrounded by locked doors and encrypted servers, the silver-haired woman finally turned to Emma and knelt to her level. "We've been waiting for this call," she said. "Your father started something 3 years ago, something enormous. But when he got sick, everything went dark." Emma's hands clenched her notebook. "He left everything with me," she whispered. "But I didn't know what it meant. Not until now." Michael stepped forward. "Who is Judge Harrison?" "Really?" The woman stood. "A federal asset gone rogue. He's not just a judge. He's the central node in a web of judicial racketeering. You know how they say justice is blind." She laughed bitterly. "He made sure it was deaf, too." Chen looked stunned. "You're telling me a sitting federal judge has been orchestrating the downfall of elite families to steal their wealth?" "Yes," the woman confirmed, "and it's bigger than just New York. Florida, Texas, Illinois. Same blueprint. Convict someone rich, ruin their reputation. freeze their assets, then redistribute them through shell companies to a network of clean beneficiaries. Those companies all trace back to accounts tied to Harrison's inner circle. Michael's eyes widen. Well, he needs testimony, court rulings, confessions. Exactly, the agent said. And tomorrow, at 8 a.m., he's holding an emergency hearing. He'll try to push through a final judgment claiming you confessed to offshore embezzlement. He'll use forged documents, audio clips, and a fake witness to finish the job. Emma felt her stomach twist. And I'm the fake witness, she said softly. The woman nodded grimly. He'll say you admitted Michael told you everything, that you found the account ledgers, that you begged the court to show mercy. Emma turned away, trying not to cry. Her voice came out raw. He's going to use me the same way he used my dad, as a tool. No, Chen said, stepping forward. He's going to try. Then Michael said the thing that flipped the room upside down. What if we let him think he wins? Everyone turned. We give him what he wants. Michael continued. Emma walks into court and testifies, says what he's expecting. But while he's celebrating, he looked at the agents, take the bait and follow the money trail. Freeze every account, arrest every contact in it. The agents exchanged glances. It's dangerous. One of them said. Emma closed her notebook with a snap, so is letting him keep hurting people. Her eyes burned now with fear, with fury. For 3 years, he's been stealing justice from families like mine, destroying lives like mine. But tomorrow, she looked up at the agents, at Chen, and Michael. I'm going to take it back. And then, almost prophetically, the hospital lights flickered again. The war wasn't over, but for the first time, she would be writing the rules. Morning came, but it didn't bring sunlight. It brought shadows. Heavy, gray clouds loomed over Manhattan, casting the courthouse in a washed-out gloom that made everything feel colder. As the black government SUV pulled up to the curb, the crowd, waiting on the courthouse steps, surged with flashes of cameras and shouts from journalists, desperate for a soundbite. Rumors had already spread overnight, whispers of bribery, betrayal, and a child at the center of it all. Inside the SUV, Emma Johnson sat perfectly still. She wore a dark blue dress, one of Michael's choosing. Modest but elegant hand, her notebook rested on her lap like a holy text. Her hands trembled slightly, not with fear, but with the impossible weight of what she was about to do. You don't have to do this alone, Michael said softly from beside her. I know, Emma replied. Her voice wasn't the voice of an 8-year-old anymore. It was something deeper, steadier, as if the fire inside her had burned away every last trace of fear. But I do have to do it. The courtroom was packed. Reporters, lawyers, federal agents in disguise. And there, at the bench, sat Judge Franklin Harrison. He looked the same as he always did, cold, calculating, immaculately dressed. But Emma noticed something else now. Desperation behind the eyes. His perfect mask was slipping, bringing the witness. He commanded. Emma rose from her seat and walked slowly to the front of the room. No one tried to stop her. She was no longer a child who interrupted court. She was the most dangerous person in the building. When she stood behind the witness stand, Harrison's gaze bored into her like an auger drilling into ice. Miss Johnson, he said with practiced charm, would you kindly share with the court what Mr. Thompson told you regarding the accounts in the Caymans? Emma blinked once. Everyone leaned forward. Double quotes. Yes, Your Honor, she said clearly. I will. She opened her notebook, flipped to a page. Pause. Double quotes. He told me, she said slowly, that someone was stealing from him, framing him. That someone in this very courtroom was trying to make him disappear. Harrison's fingers twitched. Gasps rippled through the gallery. Excuse me, Harrison said, voice tightening. Emma didn't flinch. He told me about a liar who didn't defend him, a fiancé who planted evidence, a judge who rigged trials and laundered wealth through fake convictions. Enough. Harrison's gavel cracked across the wood. This is contempt of court. But Emma lifted her voice over him. He told me that justice isn't about who speaks the loudest but who tells the truth. Even when it's dangerous. Cameras flashed. Reporters leapt to their feet. Harrison's rage twisted into something feral. You insolent little. And that's when Agent Mitchell stood. Judge Harrison, she said, her voice thunderous. You are under arrest for conspiracy, racketeering, bribery, witness tampering, and attempted murder. Every courtroom exit suddenly filled with federal agents, NYPD, and marshals. What, this is absurd, Harrison roared, standing up, pointing a trembling hand. She's just a child. She doesn't understand the law. She understands justice, Agent Mitchell said coldly, flashing a warrant. Something you've spent years corrupting. Emma watched as Harrison was handcuffed. Richard Davis was next. Victoria Sterling, flown in from federal custody, sobbed silently as she was led away. The courtroom descended into chaos, but Emma just sat quietly on the witness stand, notebook closed. Hands folded. It was over. Not the whole war, not yet. But this battle, the one her father had warned her about, the one that had nearly destroyed Michael and his family, that part was finished, and she had won it. Later that day, in a secure conference room at FBI headquarters, the press was given the full story, not just of the trial, but of the nationwide conspiracy. The names of the families who had been ruined, the empires dismantled, the way justice had been bought, sold, and buried until a little girl with a notebook said, "I can defend him." Emma stood next to Michael as he addressed the media. "She's not just the bravest person I've ever known," he said, voice breaking. "She's the reason I'm alive. She's the reason truth still means something." They asked Emma if she wanted to speak. She walked to the podium. Her mother watched from the crowd. Detective Chen stood beside her. William Thompson, now fully recovered, nodded with quiet pride. "My name is Emma Thompson Johnson," she said clearly. "I'm 9 years old. I like juice boxes and mystery books. I miss my dad every day, and I learned something very important. This year," she opened her notebook one last time, "justice isn't perfect. People who wear suits and hold gavels can still do evil things. But good people, really good people, can stop them, even if they're small, even if they're scared, even if they don't have anything but a pencil, a notebook, and a reason to care." There was silence, and then thunderous applause. Emma stepped back. Her eyes were shining, but she didn't cry. Not yet. That night, in her new room, walls painted the soft lavender she had picked herself, Emma tucked her notebook into a box labeled "Case Closed" and climbed into bed. Outside, the wind stirred the trees, and in the sky, above Manhattan, the stars seemed just a little bit brighter, because somewhere, her father was watching, and he was proud. So proud. She had done what he trained her for. She had defended the innocent. She had told the truth, and she had proven to the whole world that even the smallest voice could change everything.